Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into an incredibly provocative essay by a writer named Shou Feng. We're going to unpack a piece of writing that literally upends everything we've ever been taught about the so-called virtue of making an effort. It is a fascinating perspective. It completely challenges the whole foundation of modern hustle culture, and we're going to break it all down visually for you right now.
Think about how many times you've heard this exact phrase. Make an effort. We've all heard it, right? It's this universal command from our parents, our teachers, mentors. It's totally baked into our society. But according to the source material we're looking at today, it might actually be the single most deceptive piece of advice you could ever receive.
So, the author of this essay, Shou Feng, he came to this radical realization. After personally taking some huge hits from following traditional success philosophies, he specifically calls out the teachings of Napoleon Hill, by the way. He basically concluded that these success studies were just a scam, and that led him to this massive, startling conclusion. Effort is not just a deception, it is the very root of enslavement. Wow. It's a heavy statement for sure. So how exactly does he justify that? All right, let's jump into Section 1, Decoding the Characters, the linguistic deconstruction. To prove this massive paradigm shift, Shou Feng points to what he believes is the divine heritage of Chinese characters. He kicks off his linguistic detective work with the character for marriage. Now, as you can see how it's constructed here, it combines the radical for woman with the character for clouded judgment. The essay implies that this structure actually suggests you enter into marriage without clear thinking, kind of like going in with a clouded mind. He then contrasts that right away with the character for good. Now, this one is formed by combining the characters for woman and man, symbolizing a harmonious union. By putting these two concepts side by side, Shou Feng poses a really profound philosophical question. Basically, if marriage implies clouded judgment, does the union of a woman and a man in that state truly yield what is defined here as good? It sets the stage perfectly to show how words can carry these hidden and sometimes pretty cynical truths. And well, that brings us to his ultimate gut punch. This is the core of his entire thesis. Just look at the literal construction of the character for effort. It's built directly from two very distinct symbols. The top part, that means slave, and the bottom part means strength. So when you smash them together to form the word effort, you are literally writing a slave strength. So according to his analysis, effort literally translates to the toil of a slave. And the implication here, the harder you try under this banner of effort, the deeper you sink into slavery. It's framed as a linguistic warning, meant for the intelligent, just cautioning them against mindlessly exerting themselves.
Moving on to Section 2, Effort versus Passion, Rethinking Hard Work.
So if the word itself is warning us against effort, does that mean we should just, stop trying to achieve anything at all? To answer that, let's consider a really relatable scenario. Picture a young person going to an internet cafe and getting completely obsessed with a game. They play for over 10 hours straight. They aren't eating, they aren't drinking, they aren't sleeping. They are exerting this immense, crazy amount of energy and focus. But would you actually call this forced toil? Is this effort? Or let's look at an even more extreme example. Think of a mountaineer scaling the peaks of Mount Everest. They endure extreme hardship, freezing temperatures, literal life-threatening risks. Yet, they're doing it with massive enthusiasm. Is that really effort? Are they forcing themselves to do it against their will? Absolutely not. So, the absolutely crucial point here is how we actually define the driving force behind the action. Shou Feng argues that neither the gamer nor the mountaineer are exerting effort. Their extreme endeavors are driven purely by intrinsic motivation and passion. True effort, at least in his definition, only exists when external forces compel you to completely suppress your own innate nature. So what actually makes something true effort in this framework? Well, it happens when you're forced by outside pressures. It requires you to actively suppress what you naturally want to be doing. It's totally driven by obligation. Think of forced studying, obligatory networking, or just grinding at a job you hate just to hit some distant goal. By nature, nobody actually wants to do these things. Therefore, the essay concludes, effort is the mark of slaves. Slave masters, notably, never exert effort. Shou Feng actually uses his own life as a perfect example of this distinction. He manages a vacation resort and writes almost every single day. Now, that sounds like a ton of hard work, right? But he insists it isn't effort at all. It is entirely driven by his own willing enjoyment. He does it simply because it's interesting and fun to him,
which completely removes it from that category of a slave's strength. Which brings us to Section 3, the futility of force. Why effort fails. Beyond just being a form of psychological slavery, Zhu argues that forced effort without natural talent is, frankly, practically useless. He uses these vivid, almost humorous metaphors to rapidly drive the point home. Think about it. A rooster can spend its entire life trying to fly, but it's never going to outsoar an eagle. A sheep can train as rigorously as it possibly can, but it cannot fight off a wolf. And imagine if the famous entrepreneur Jack Ma had dedicated his entire life to becoming an NBA star. No amount of pure effort could ever bridge that gap.
The takeaway from these metaphors is super blunt. In Xu worldview, without the right inherent talent, effort is just entirely meaningless. Actually, scratch that. It's worse than meaningless. If you're suppressing your true nature to forcefully pursue a goal you are totally mismatched for, the harder you try, the worse the outcome will actually be. You're really just grinding yourself down to nothing.
So let's look at Section 4, the passion paradigm, a new way forward. Okay, so if we completely abandon this deeply ingrained concept of pushing through the pain, how in the world do we achieve anything? The author's solution is refreshingly straightforward. Everyone should simply engage in what they love. When you follow your natural passion, a magical shift happens. You automatically become fully and willingly dedicated. You're totally fine with sacrificing and giving it your all, but it doesn't feel like toil. And most importantly, it completely eliminates the need for any external, enslaving pressure to get things done.
Zhu finishes his essay with this incredibly bold and definitive declaration. Goodbye, effort. Your reign of slavery is over. It is a complete and utter breakup with the concept of hustle culture and forced labor. He's officially closing the door on the idea that success somehow requires miserable, forced toil. As we wrap up this explainer, we want to leave you with this final, provocative thought based on Xu essay. Take a hard look at your own life and the tasks you tackle every single day. Are your daily actions truly driven by intrinsic, joyful passion, or are you simply exerting a slave's strength? It might just be time to evaluate what is truly driving you. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the source material, and we will see you next time.